Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us at this breakout session on how to succeed at a virtual career fair. We have some wonderful speakers to join us today. Before I start, I'm going to share my screen and do some housekeeping work. So please remember to use the chat to engage. If you have any technical issues, you can contact me in the chat or Marco Soto. For questions, we will have Q&A at the end, so please feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom window for any questions you would like to provide to our moderator and our panelists. If you are not already, please make sure to follow us across social media and share your reflections from this symposium and this session across all platforms. Here are some tags you can use and our social media links. Well, if you have any questions, please ask in the chat. Now I would like to introduce our moderator, Nikki Eganoff from Workday, who will then introduce our panelists. Nikki, all yours.
Thanks, Gloria. Welcome to today's breakout session on how to be successful in a virtual career fair. I know we're really excited to be here with you today. We have three awesome panelists. I will let them introduce themselves in just a moment, James, Brian, and Clodagh. But before we do, I want to set the stage for this conversation. I know this is a webinar and can't be as conversational as maybe another setting could be, but we want to, as best as possible, make sure that we give you as much information to help you be successful in potentially the virtual career fair tomorrow, but into the future as well. So please use that Q&A function throughout. Don't wait to the end. We'll do our best to incorporate our thoughts and responses to your questions as we go. But to get started, I'd like to introduce our panelists. And we're really going to, today's conversation, we're gonna kind of look at three main sections of how to be successful in a career fair. One, the preparation piece, how to prepare yourself, how to set yourself up for success. Two, logistically, how to show up and how to stand out in a virtual career fair. And then finally, how to wrap up your career fair experience and help that to propel you into the rest of your interviews for seeking your next career. So let's open it up to the panelists. James, I'll let you introduce yourself first, then Clodagh, then Brian.
Hey everyone, my name is James Pan. I'm an associate director at Protiviti. I've been with Protiviti for over 11 years, and I specifically help with a lot of the technology risk practice, doing a number of different types of assessments, including factor analysis of information risk, IT implementations, and mergers and acquisition security activities. Really quick, Protiviti, if you guys are not aware, is a global consulting firm. It is wholly owned by Robert Half International, and we were founded in 2002 with over 85 offices and across 25 countries.
Thanks, James. Clodagh?
Thanks, James. Welcome, everyone. I'm super excited to be in this virtual room with you all today. My name is Clodagh Scannell. I just go by Clo. My background is actually in talent acquisition, talent management, and career development. Spent a number of years at a couple of global banks and also in career services. So for those of you who don't use your career services partners at the schools that you're in, I would highly encourage you to do so. They're very active and fantastic people to help you with all things career development. But my current role is I'm the partnerships team at 10,000 Coffees. So I switched gears over to technology and sales, and I'm loving the new career shift that I've made. So happy to share some insight with you all on that. And Brian, I'll pass it to you.
Amazing. Thank you, Chloe. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Pang. My pronouns are he, him. I am a product director at Electronic Arts, where I support and lead development teams and also design and marketing teams. And I'm a global board chair for our Asian ERG, which spans 5 continents and 40 locations. I've been with Ascend for a year and a half, and I joined the Vancouver leadership team last year. And yeah, I hope you're all enjoying the symposium so far. Back to you, Nikki.
Fantastic. Thank you all. As you see, we have a wealth of knowledge from different industries, different experience from the hiring side, from the talent acquisition side. So let's jump right in on how to be successful in a virtual career fair. Let's start with the prep piece. So Claude, I'm going to start with you. With all of your years of talent acquisition, hiring experience, specifically early talent, I would love to open up your thoughts on how best to prepare yourself to attend a virtual career fair, thinking about branding, thinking about how you're showing up.
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. So I'd say I'm going to make a couple of points, and I'd love to hear from Brian and James as well, based on what I share. But I think there's a couple of things as you prepare for the virtual career fair. One is definitely your online profile and resume. So what that means is we all know everyone's on social media platforms today. And I think students underestimate how much access employers actually have to your information. So I think it's really important that you're always keeping up to date with your social media platforms, making sure that you're sharing the right content and representing yourself in an appropriate manner online. So making sure prior to you attending the career fair that you have all of those things up to date is one really easy way to be able to make sure that you're prepared. The other piece is making sure you're doing your research. So, knowing who is going to be attending the career fair, knowing which recruiters are going to be in the room and from which organizations, maybe being able to find some things that resonate with you online, where it's associated with that particular employer. That's really helpful for you to really show up and be prepared. I would say the other piece is we do underestimate technology and the power of the failures of technology. So make sure you're testing out your Zoom or whatever link you're going into, and making sure that your computer is charged, you're showing up 100% prior to actually getting into the room. Those are all some easy tips that can go a long way as you start to get into the nuts and bolts of the actual operational side of the career fair. So I'll pause there, and I would love to hear from my teammates here on the line if they have anything to add.
I'll add a few more. So I cannot reiterate more what Chloe said about updating your LinkedIn profile. You want to make sure you're double checking all your dates in there, all the details, like the basic information, and do update it. Like add your skills and any relevant work experience that might be relevant for the roles that you're looking for. And Chloe touched on doing research. I would also add in just read through the open job recs that are available and visible to you. Be ready to share why you're interested in those roles, why you think you might be qualified for those roles. And if this is underutilized, but if you know someone who works in that company that you're interested in, reach out to them and ask them to give you some advice on the roles and maybe potentially some of the recruiters and hiring managers. And always think of the end, like begin with the end in mind, right? That's one of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So visualize yourself talking to the recruiter, and also following up with the recruiter later, right? What would you say? What would you ask later? I think Chloe might have touched on this, but definitely work in your introduction, really practice it before you go into the career fair. So what you want to include, I think there's a question here about that. Ideally, what you include in your elevator pitch is tell the recruiter what you're all about, right? What are your personal and professional missions? What brought you to the career fair, and why this specific recruiting booth, and what do you hope to get out of the discussion as well? James?
Sounds good. As it relates to preparation, I think that registration, like registering for the companies that you're interested in, is extremely important. Most companies have a site where we'll share a registration link, and that helps employers know that you're actually interested and you're excited. So do that. Sometimes as well, you'll have a different experience than a physical career fair. When I've done physical career fairs, I'm there as someone talking one-on-one with an individual. Sometimes you're actually just not even on video and you're actually chatting with people. And then sometimes you also are on video. So in those instances, in the virtual career fair, what I find is actually recruiters are actively trying to talk to you. So you can be very overwhelmed with messages, people trying to video chat you and things like that. So actually have a prepared, a little bit, a blurb, a paragraph about yourself, about that company, if you're really targeted and you really thought about it as well. And then also, I think that's extremely important. Just making sure you're really prepared from that perspective.
I'd love to dig into the goal piece, like having a goal before coming into the career fair, because, and this could be a question for anyone, but what is the difference between, say, a virtual career fair and an interview? Should I be preparing for an interview, or should I be preparing in a different way? What kind of expectation should I set for myself? What should my goal be at the end of the career fair?
Maybe Nikki, I'll take this. And
Sure.
Brian, I saw you go for it, but I'll just chime in and then you can jump in. But I think it's a great question. And one of the things about the virtual career fair is, so when you think about an interview, the decision has been made, or you've been invited by the employer to join the employer in an interview. The difference between the virtual career fair is, like, this is your opportunity to actually evaluate the employer and really understand the culture, the values of the organization, and what the role entails that you're actually looking to get into. And I think that's a really great opportunity for you prior to your job application or submitting your job application to learn more about those specific things. Because at the end of the day, your career is going to be very long. And so we have to make sure that we're evaluating the employers that we want to work for. And so the virtual career fair is your opportunity to ask questions and to really understand in depth, again, what you're getting yourself into. And so I think, when you think about that goal, if you see that there's specific job openings that you'd like to apply to, that's your opportunity to ask them, really detailed questions about that particular opportunity and learn as much as you can from those recruiters, because really it's their job to share as much information with you in that setting as possible. Whereas the interview is a little bit more structured, where the employer is getting to know you as a person in more depth. And so you are really that evaluator. And I would say that's the core and key difference.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Chloe. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that's a great point, Chloe. I think that there are not necessarily interviews, although they'll likely lead to interviews. And so make sure you're preparing yourself for that potential role that you're interested in. Make sure that you're excited and you've done your research. Again, I don't think we can emphasize enough the pre-work and planning that can take place. And one thing I actually forgot to mention as well is that there are different platforms that exist for virtual career fairs, such as vFairs, Hopin, and Blue Jeans. And all of those are kind of new technologies that have taken place over the past several years that are a little bit different to use than Microsoft Teams or Zoom. And so make sure you familiarize yourself. I think Chloe had mentioned making sure you're in a good environment with stable internet. That's extremely important, because it can be very frustrating from an employer perspective if you're talking to someone and their internet cuts in and out and things like that.
Awesome. Thanks.
I'll add one last piece is ideally you want to be memorable and in a good way. So, and remember, recruiters could have hundreds and some of them might have even thousands of candidates that they're speaking with. So they do need to make quick assessments from various touch points. So definitely how you present yourself in your first, second, and maybe even third impressions do matter. But Chloe brought up an amazing point as well, is this is your chance to also interview the company, right? So it doesn't need to be a formal interview, but definitely make that first great impression.
Brian, I'd ask that we continue on this being memorable piece, because I think that's top of mind for everyone. Like, how do I stand out? How do I look different than everyone else that's a part of this virtual career fair? So I'm sure you've been on the hiring side countless of times. What stands out to you maybe when you're interviewing a candidate or talking to a potential candidate or participating in a career fair, how do you show yourself as memorable?
Well, I think it really starts with being authentic. So I always look for folks who are either like trying to tell me what I want to hear versus showing genuine interest and capabilities for the role itself. So there's some basic things, and I'll come back to what I just said, but basic things for me would include, dress appropriately, know what kind of environment you're applying to. For example, if you work in a professional setting, make sure you're not wearing like a tank top, or make sure you wear a shirt at least. James touched on making sure your software works. I think that's super important. It is quite frustrating for folks on any call, really, if someone's trying to speak, but you can't hear them. So just basic table stakes is just make sure your audio and your lighting works. Test your mute button, right? And definitely make sure you're audible. So ideally, if you're in a loud coffee shop, that's probably not the best environment to have a deep discussion. So try to make sure you're in a quiet spot, a setting, and make sure that the other party can hear what you're saying. And if you're able to, definitely turn on your cameras, because that helps with the memory and ensuring that the recruiter can remember who you are afterwards. And then going back to authenticity, I'd say really be yourself. Right? Remember, you are a good candidate, right? You're here for a reason. So try to not say things that people want to hear. And as a hiring manager, what I really look for are a few qualities. I definitely look for people who have experience, people who have passion for the role, and also the education. So I usually look for those three qualities at a high level. But I would also consider candidates who have maybe 2 out of the 3. So, and again, those are experience, passion, and education. So 2 of the 3 is good enough for me, because I always feel the third could be learned as well.
Mm-hmm. Great point, Brian. And just to add, Nikki, I would say, with that passion piece, sometimes when we're in a virtual world, it's really challenging to show your passion or your energy or how excited you are for the opportunity. And so it goes a long way, but like lean in and be present, look in the camera, show your energy. And when you do get an opportunity to ask a question, be succinct and thoughtful, take notes throughout the session, so that when, if someone like Brian or myself or James are evaluating for passion, we can see that come through even in a split 5 seconds opportunity that you get on the mic and the camera. So really be present. I know, and Nikki, this will probably resonate with you. I've done hundreds of virtual sessions where people don't turn on their camera and they're just kind of that fly on the wall. And if you really want that opportunity, you're not going to get the job if you're the fly on the wall. So turn on those cameras and put your smile on and be engaged and show your energy.
Any thoughts on how to convey that level of enthusiasm, passion, energy when you only get the opportunity to chat, text, when you only get the opportunity to show up in text form, in word form? How do you convey that level of energy and passion? Because not all engagements in a career fair will have the opportunity to be on video.
I think I can try to take this one. I think similar to what Chloe and Brian were saying, be genuine, be authentic, but also share your story if you can succinctly. Share your story of why you're interested in this role, about yourself. And it could be a sentence or 2. And you can kind of craft that story as an elevator pitch, right? And as part of that prep work as well, you can create that paragraph, really think about it. Think about the points that you're trying to convey, the specific role that you're trying to get, your interest and whatnot, but also why you would be a great value and fit for the company as well. And so you can really think about that both when you're speaking it out loud, but then also like prepare a paragraph. So then when you're actually at these virtual career fairs and a number of companies are reaching out, you have this paragraph ready to go. And you can also make sure you also have your resume ready to go as well. Make sure you have your paragraph, make sure you have your resume. And what I would also recommend as well is when you're chatting, just via text. That's around like 5 minutes that you'll have with with an individual, and then if it's video, it'll be probably around 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'd love to dig into the questions. So you're conversing with a recruiter, either live or via text. What can you ask them? What should you ask them? Can you ask them about roles that are not posted, that are not featured, but maybe you saw on their website? Is there anything that you would recommend, how to use those 5 minutes well? If you're only getting 5 minutes, what kind of questions, are you able to ask?
I'll go first. And I'd love to hear from everyone, of course. So after the elevator pitch and the self-introductions, and really to riff on what James said just before this question, is put yourself in the recruiter's shoes and think about why would the recruiter or hiring manager, why should they necessarily care, right? What is in it for them? Because as I mentioned, they're probably going through hundreds of discussions. And you want to make sure you're giving them something that they can take back with them. But in terms of the conversation after that point, there's lots of great questions you could ask. And remember, you're also assessing whether the company is a good fit for you. So some sample questions I would think of is ask things like, how would you describe the company's culture? What does a day look like in this particular role? And have the hiring manager or recruiter walk through what a typical day looks like. Ask questions about career growth. What are the job prospects within the organization? Talk about or ask about the teams or the specific team that you're applying for. What is the team dynamic? What else? How there's a hot topic nowadays is ESG, which is environmental social governance. Ask the hiring manager or recruiter, what is the organization doing to contribute to ESG around the world? Those are, I'll pause there.
The one thing I'll say to that as well is do your research. Most companies actually do publish an ESG report every single year. So if you actually take a look at that online, you can see a lot of the environmental efforts that a company has gone through. And there's a lot of regulations around that right now. So most public companies will have that. So do your research as well, and then ask more thoughtful questions related to those.
Mm-hmm. And Brian and James, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Two things that I would add is when you think about the hiring process. So as a student, you might not be familiar with every organization's hiring process, and each individual hiring process might look very different. And so I think setting yourself up for success is really, being able to open that page and know exactly what to expect. And so don't be afraid to ask the recruiters, what does the hiring process look like for this particular role or for my internship? And then as a follow-up to that, I would say, again, and I'm learning this as a salesperson, but don't be afraid to ask how you can stay in touch with people. How do you like to be communicated with? Is it email? Is it text? Is it a phone call? How can I stay in touch with you to learn more about the organization? Those questions go a long way, and it also makes the recruiters feel comfortable, right? If they don't want you to call or text them, they can be very clear with you on how to get in touch with them after the session. And then, Brian, I think you touched on a really great point. As we think about career development, all of you are thinking about what your career is going to look like, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And you want to work for an organization who has career pathing and has support for individuals like yourself. So don't be afraid to ask about mentorship, about career development opportunities, about programs that will help you not only with your professional development, but with your personal development too, and be able to really understand what that looks like prior to applying for any job.
Yeah, fantastic.
And Nikki, before you move on, I think there was a question that you added, which I think came from the live Q&A here. Mm-hmm. So it's about roles and asking the recruiter or hiring manager about roles that aren't listed on the job boards. So yes, you should ask about those roles. And I would say, as I mentioned before, there could be second or third or fourth impressions, but certainly if you have a good rapport and you build a great relationship, and a lot of this might come in the post-event follow-ups, the chances are the recruiter or hiring manager will keep your file, and as openings pop up, which you might be a good fit for, they can reach back out to you. So just because there may not be a great opportunity today doesn't mean another one won't open up tomorrow.
Sure. And in big companies, Chloe talked about kind of the hiring process and how it's convoluted and complex. So it's good to note that in big companies, recruiters focus on certain roles and certain areas. So you might find yourself in a conversation with a recruiter who doesn't necessarily recruit for the role that you are interested in. If you're interested in a software engineering role, you might find yourself in a conversation with a sales recruiter, and that's okay. You're still making a great first impression. You're still showing yourself off. You can ask questions about the position, but no, they might not know all of the nitty-gritty specifics that you want to know, but they will. If you show up well, they will pass your name to the correct recruiter. So it's still a great opportunity to show up, ask questions about the company, but realize that this might be the first of many conversations in your path in this recruiting process. I'll take a quick pause here and encourage anyone on the line. We have about 15 minutes left. Now's the time to get your questions into the Q&A. All questions are worthy of asking, so please put it out there. We'll do our best to provide thoughts. I would love to kind of finish out with what's next. How do we end? We were just on this virtual career fair for 2 hours. We exuded a lot of energy. We're exhausted. Now what? What do we do afterwards? What's the hope? Would love to hear from everyone, but we'll start with you, James. Kind of, what's your thoughts on how to end this time well and how to use this momentum?
I think one of the main things I would say here is it's just actually something that Chloe mentioned here, is around asking the way that the recruiter or hiring manager would like to be communicated with, and then following up with that individual. Add a personal anecdote that you learned. If you found out that person likes football, or if you found out that person likes a specific type of food, bring that up in that part of that conversation and express continued interest in that role. And so that can be in LinkedIn, that can be in email. Those are generally the ways that I've seen communication have, but they can be in other ways as well. And so I would just make sure that you're succinct in that messaging, you're being memorable, and then you're kind of following up on some of the next steps there.
Awesome.
And I'll add maybe like practically some sort of a flow of that email could look like this. So say something like, hi, my name is so-and-so. I met you at the Ascend Career Fair and we talked about, XYZ, and I'd like to follow up on the openings that we discussed. So that's usually a good structure of that initial reach out. And I would also add that it's important to also be patient with the other party. So if it's a recruiter, again, I mentioned they're probably going through hundreds of these. Be patient and space your follow-ups out accordingly. I think I personally get overwhelmed sometimes with LinkedIn emails, and it's hard to keep up. So yeah, exercise some patience. Usually the recruiters will get back to you.
Yeah, I think we've gotten that one, Nikki. I wouldn't add anything
Fantastic.
else. Brian and James did fantastic. I know there is a question in the Q&A. I'm keeping an eye on it here around the elevator pitch. If okay with you, I'd love to start that, and then happy for everyone to jump in. But I think there's a couple of things that we may not have touched on, which is really important with your elevator pitch. One is your pitch can be different for each individual career fair that you go to. There are some consistencies, but I would say start with the goal of what you're trying to get out of that particular event. So identify the goal of what you're trying to portray with your elevator pitch and start with there. And then explain what you do as a student. So whether it's you're involved in extracurricular activities, whether it's you play a sport, whether it's you're really, you love video games, or you're really creative and you do Rubik's Cube, or whatever it is, and Brian, I see you put your hand up here. But whatever it is, what makes you unique, you must include that, because we're all humans. We all are passionate about specific things, and that's what drives us as human beings. And so portray that in your elevator pitch so that you can start to associate yourself with the values and the culture of the organization. And then what makes you unique versus every other candidate. So, you can bring some personality to it. You can be, kind of witty and humorous, whatever makes you unique as a human being, make sure that you're incorporating that. And then I would say, and I'd love to hear from my teammates if they'd add anything else, but the final piece is practice, practice, practice. Don't be afraid to, look at yourself in the mirror and explain it to yourself or read it off on a cue card a couple of times, because when we're under pressure, and I know this being an athlete, you can practice all you want, but when you're in the game, that's what matters. And if you haven't done enough, then you'll get nervous, or you'll use filler words, or you won't be as succinct as you'd like to be. So once you have crafted it, make sure that you're practicing in front of a mirror, so that when the going gets tough, you're ready to go and you know it off by heart.
Chloe, I would even push it further. I would just say practice with someone you trust. Practice with someone.
Practice with your personal board of directors.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you don't have one, get one.
Oh, I would also mention, make sure you're also just including when you're graduating as well. I think if you're looking for an internship, if you're looking for a full-time employee, like all those things that Chloe mentioned, but you can kind of start your sentence like, "Hey, I'm James. I'm graduating this year with this major."
Yeah, fantastic. That leads into kind of close, start with the goal. Start with why I'm here. One sentence, this is my goal. Explain you, what you do, what makes you unique, and then summarize that. What are you looking for? And I think what I'm hearing you say is the practice is not necessarily about memorization, not to memorize this script, to be fully comfortable with who you are and what you want to say. So the practice, when you're explaining something that you know nothing about, it's stressful. Your heart rate elevates. You are more likely to add filler words and trip over your words. When you're explaining your passion, something that you love to do, it just flows out of you, even though you didn't memorize a thing. So the practice is about knowing yourself and knowing how you want to portray yourself, not about memorization. Fantastic. Thanks, Chloe, for really digging in on the elevator pitch there. There is a question about your resume, your LinkedIn account, how that should come into conversation with the recruiter. We'd love to open it up. Any thoughts that the group has there on when best to bring it into the conversation?
I think if you're giving a text, like if you're sharing a paragraph, you can also include here are my social media links as well. LinkedIn, you can have a QR code, a URL. You can show that at the bottom of your paragraph. That's a nice way of doing it.
Yeah, I would say it's likely already in the conversation before you bring it up. As a recruiter, as someone who's pretty tech savvy nowadays, as soon as a name pops up, I'm on LinkedIn typing in that name. So know that your presence is probably preceding you. And so you want to make sure it's a strong one. And also it should be something you follow up on as well. So sending a LinkedIn notification or a request to the recruiter with a little blurb about who you are, I think is great.
We talked a lot about intros and elevator pitch, but also equally important is your outro. So make sure you're closing the conversation succinctly and with like a call to action almost. So part of that should be, if it doesn't already come up through the conversation, just offer it and say, look, I'd like to share my resume and LinkedIn profile. Is that okay? Right. And, to Nikki's point, chances are the recruiters already looked you up. But it gives a chance for the recruiter to say, sure, I'll take it.
Yeah, fantastic. One question just came in about an interview tomorrow. So likely understanding this as a recruiter screen or a hiring manager screen. Anyone, we only have about 4 minutes left, but would love thoughts on what to expect within a screening conversation. Is it formal? Is it a little bit informal?
I would say be prepared for anything. So, treat it like as if it was an interview. It may not be, but as I mentioned, your first impression matters. It could lead to an interview, a formal interview. So that would be your second impression. So I would treat it with the same level of rigor, but I would also say, again, just be authentic and be yourself. Remember, you are here for a reason and you are a great candidate. So don't forget that. There's also a thing called over preparing. So try not to think too much about it and feel too stressed about it. Just let the conversation flow, let your personality flow, and just really think, like, practice, right? Definitely practice, prepare, but don't over prepare, if that makes sense.
And really quick, I think that's a great point. I think a lot of times we can easily tell if someone's just reading off a script, right? So be genuine, be authentic, prepare, but don't over prepare. It's a balance.
And I would just add as well, because you brought up a great point, Nikki, around screens versus interviews, etc. I would say as a student, if you were an experienced hire and you're going through an interview screen, the recruiter's probably evaluating to make sure that you have all the specific criteria that the role entails. In campus recruitment and early talent, it's a little bit of a different process, because from a student perspective, we know as early talent recruiters, you don't have all the experience, or you might not tick all the boxes. And so as part of those screens and interviews, they're really trying to understand, again, what makes you unique, but what are some of those attributes and some of those transferable skills that you have based on your experience that could potentially give you and potentially help you in this particular role. So as my teammates mentioned here, don't over prepare, because the reality is you don't have tons of work experience that you can pull from, but you probably have some life experiences that you can tell people about, and that's unique and genuine, right? Because that's your true lived experience. And so again, don't be over prepared. We're all humans, but make sure that you remember and think back about these life experiences that you've had, whether it's travel again, or sports teams, or leadership programs, or whatever you've done, and pull that in to show how you can be successful in the role.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chloe. So we're nearing the end of our time. I would love to invite each panelist to share not necessarily one piece of advice, because I think this whole panel was about advice, but one piece of encouragement to the group. This can be a stressful and a nerve-wracking process. And so I think we need to surround ourselves with those personal board of directors, just like you said, Brian, and encouragement. So what's one piece of encouragement that you would like to offer to the group?
I'll go first. So I think this whole process could be very overwhelming. But again, I'll stress again that I shouldn't have used the word stress, but I'll reiterate that there's no substitute for authenticity. So we will know if you're not being authentic. And in terms of preparing, something that I find helpful is just visualizing, right? So what would you say to a recruiter if you saw them in person? What would you say to a recruiter if you met them through this fair and then you met them again later down the road? So just think about what you would say, how you would say it, and that should help you overall prepare for the conversation. And yeah, just don't overthink it. Be yourself. You'll do great.
Thanks, Brian. Maybe I'll jump in. And for those of you who might Google all of us afterwards, you'll know I'm a big basketball person, played basketball, love basketball, coach basketball now. And so I'll be cliche and say that MJ always says you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And so you have to put yourself out there. You have to try, you have to do it. You're not going to get every job that you apply for, but building resiliency as a student today is going to help you in your career as you go down the line. So jump in, full force, apply for the roles, and make sure that you don't feel bad for yourself, because we all have failures, but make sure you keep trying and the right one will land and stick.
Oh, I'm from Chicago, so you stole that from me. No.
I read your mind, James.
I can hear the theme song right now.
We don't have a lot of time left, but I'll just say there's enough space for you, right? I think there's a lot of times where I've experienced like there's maybe they don't need someone with my skill set or with my background, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not technical enough for this role. I think there's enough space for you, and if you work hard, it'll work out.
Awesome.
Those are my words of encouragement.
I'll end with one last piece of encouragement, to know that these recruiters, these hiring managers, they want you to join the company. They want you to be successful. They're trying to, find you. They're not trying to screen you out. They're trying to discover you. And so make it easy for them. Let yourself shine in your true, genuine nature. And I think just coming in with that confidence that I am wanted, I belong here. I think honestly that goes a long way in how you show up and how people perceive you. So at that, we will end the panel portion of this breakout session. Thank you all for attending. I will probably go say for the whole panel, feel free to invite us to connect on LinkedIn, practice those skills of saying, hey, this is me. I met you on this breakout session. Let's connect. Over to you, Gloria.
Thank you so much, panelists, and Nikki for moderating. I think we got to most of the questions, but if there are any follow-ups, please feel free to email us. I'm gloria.lee@ascendleadership.org. If you want to get the questions over to the panelists, I'm happy to help be that person. And with that, I want to do some final housekeeping work. Please follow us on social media. And you will be able to find out about more sessions and information that Ascend programs offer. And if you have any final questions, please feel free to visit us tomorrow at the career fair. And you'll be able to engage with more recruiters and hiring managers and ask some more questions to potential companies that you're interested in. And thank you again, all of you, for spending time with us today. And this is the close of our breakout session. Have a great day.
Thank you.